Stop. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now. We have new stories every day. Now, let's go. The fluorescent lights of Kane's computer repair hummed overhead as Joshua Kane studied the stack of unpaid bills scattered across his desk. The clock on the wall ticked past 9:45 p.m., each sound echoing in the empty shop. His eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets, trying to squeeze a few more dollars from his modest business's budget. Mr. Kane, Brian, his newest technician, poked his head into the office. The young man's uncertainty was visible in his hesitant posture. I finished the data recovery from Mrs. Way's laptop. Should I call her tonight or wait until morning? Joshua rubbed his tired eyes. What time is her backup scheduled for? 6 a.m. tomorrow. Then call her now. She runs a bakery. She'll need those recipes before opening. Joshua managed a small smile. And Brian, good work today. I saw how you handled that difficult customer this morning. Brian's face brightened. Thanks, Mr. Kane. I just did what you taught me. Patience first, solution second. As Brian left to make the call, Joshua's smile faded. His business philosophy had always been about building trust, taking care of people first and profit second. Natalie called it weak. Other repair shops charge rush fees. She complained last week. You're leaving money on the table. The memory of her words stung. His phone buzzed with a text from her. Don't bother picking up dinner. I already ate. Joshua's jaw tightened. He promised to bring home takeout from Marinello's, her favorite Italian restaurant. A peace offering after their argument this morning, when she compared their 3-bedroom house to her friend Lauren's new mansion in Silver Meadows. We could have that too if you weren't so afraid to take risks, she'd snapped over breakfast, gesturing at the magazine spread featuring local real estate. Other men know how to provide for their families. Look at Lauren's husband. He started his company the same year you opened the shop, and now they have a pool house bigger than our entire home. The shop's front door chimed through the office window. Joshua watched Mrs. Song hurry in, still wearing her flour-dusted apron. Brian greeted her with professional warmth, explaining the data recovery process as he returned her laptop. You save my recipes. Mrs. Song clutched the computer to her chest. My mother's recipes. My grandmother's everything. Yes, Mom. Mr. Kane personally supervised the recovery. We also set up an automatic cloud backup to prevent future problems. Mrs. Song's eyes welled with tears. How much for the backup? It's included in the standard service, Brian replied, following Joshua's policy. Mr. Kane believes in protecting our customers' data. Joshua watched Mrs. Song try to press extra payment on Brian, who politely declined. This was why his business grew through word of mouth rather than flashy advertising. Trust built slowly, but it lasted. After Mrs. Song left, Joshua finished the day's paperwork. The numbers weren't terrible, but they weren't great either. The shop covered its expenses and provided modest salaries for his small team. But it wasn't the rapid growth Natalie dreamed of. Time to lock up, Brian, Joshua called out. Good job today. You too, Mr. Kane. Hope things are better at home. Brian hesitated. I couldn't help overhearing Mrs. Kane this morning when she dropped off your lunch. She seemed upset. Joshua's stomach churned at the memory. Natalie had stormed in around noon, dropping a paper bag on his desk. I had lunch with Lauren, she'd announced. Her husband just bought her a 3rd car. A car, Joshua. Meanwhile, I'm driving a 4-year-old BMW like some middle manager's wife. He tried to explain about reinvesting in the business, about building sustainable growth, but she'd cut him off. I'm tired of your excuses. I'm tired of watching other women enjoy life while I'm stuck in this mediocrity. Now gathering his things, Joshua pushed the memory aside. Everything's fine, Brian. See you tomorrow. The young technician's concerned expression suggested he didn't believe it, but he nodded and left. Joshua locked up. His 10-year-old Toyota sat alone in the empty parking lot. The engine coughed before starting. Another thing Natalie complained about, The drive home felt longer than usual. Streetlights cast alternating shadows across his face as he rehearsed what he'd say to her. Maybe tonight they could have a real conversation about their marriage, about the growing distance between them. He'd explain his plans for expanding the business, show her the projections for their new data security service. Traffic was light in their suburban neighborhood. Joshua noticed an unfamiliar black Mercedes parked across the street from their house, probably one of Natalie's new friends. She'd been socializing more with the country club crowd lately, despite his concerns about the membership fees. Their modest two-story home looked different in the evening light, smaller somehow. Or maybe that was just Natalie's constant comparisons affecting his perception. The house had seemed perfect when they bought it 5 years ago. Natalie had loved the bay window in the living room, had spent weeks choosing curtains and arranging furniture. Now she called it a starter home, with the same tone someone might use for a starter marriage. Joshua parked in the driveway, noting the silence. Usually, he could hear Leah's music or the TV through the front door. Tonight, the house felt unnaturally quiet. He grabbed his briefcase, straightened his tie, and took a deep breath. Whatever mood Natalie was in, he'd handle it with patience. That's what marriage was about, working through the hard times together. If only he'd known those would be his last moments believing in their marriage. If only he'd recognized the silence for what it was. The calm before a storm that would destroy everything he'd built his life around. Natalie, Joshua called out as he entered the house, hanging his jacket by the door. The silence felt different up close, heavy with intention. Leah. In here. Natalie's voice carried from the living room, sharp as broken glass. Joshua walked in and froze. Natalie sat perched on the edge of their sofa, wearing a black designer dress he'd never seen before. Her dark hair styled in an elegant updo that spoke of professional attention. Leah sat beside her, their 17-year-old daughter's face a mirror of her mother's cold expression. "We need to talk," Natalie said, still not meeting his eyes. Her manicured fingers toyed with a strand of pearls that definitely hadn't come from him. Joshua's chest tightened. "What's going on?" "I suppose we should thank you," Natalie began, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Your predictable late nights at the shop made everything so much easier to arrange." "Arrange what?" But even as he asked, Joshua knew. The signs had been there. The new clothes, the frequent lunches with friends, the growing disdain in her eyes when she looked at him. Natalie stood, smoothing her dress with deliberate care. "I'm done pretending, Joshua. Done playing the supportive wife while you waste your life tinkering with broken computers. Done watching other women enjoy the finer things while I'm stuck in this." She gestured around their living room with evident disgust. "This mediocrity. If this is about money again," Joshua started, but Natalie's harsh laugh cut him off. "Money? No, Joshua. This is about ambition. About living versus merely existing. This is about me finally finding someone who understands the difference." The pieces clicked into place. The black Mercedes across the street, the expensive dress, the cruel anticipation in her eyes. "You're having an affair." "An affair implies something tawdry and secret," Natalie corrected, lifting her chin. "What I have with Ian is different. He's everything you're not. Successful, driven, wealthy. A man who understands that life is meant to be lived, not merely survived." "Ian Fields," Joshua murmured bitterly, recalling the businessmen who'd appeared at local charity events 6 months ago, all expensive suits and practiced charm. "You're leaving me for Ian Fields. He's taking us to Paris next month." Leah chimed in, her voice filled with the same contempt as her mother's. "First-class tickets, 5-star hotels. When was the last time you took us anywhere besides the state fair?" Joshua stared at his daughter, this stranger wearing Leah's face. "Leah, please. Money isn't everything. We have a good life." "No, you have the life you want," Leah shot back, standing to join her mother. "A boring, small life for a boring, small man. Do you know how embarrassing it is telling my friends my dad owns a repair shop?" Madison's dad just bought her a Tesla for her birthday, and I can't even get a decent allowance because you're too cheap. Too responsible, Joshua corrected, fighting to keep his voice steady. Too focused on building something real, something that lasts. 17 years, Natalie interrupted. 17 years I'd listened to your excuses about building slowly and being responsible. Well, I'm 42, Joshua. I refuse to waste another day living like this. The sound of expensive shoes on hardwood made them all turn. Ian Fields stood in the doorway, his silver hair perfectly styled, his tailored suit probably worth more than Joshua's monthly revenue. "Everything ready, darling?" he asked Natalie, completely ignoring Joshua's presence. His voice carried the practiced smoothness of someone used to getting his way. "Yes." Natalie grabbed a designer handbag from the sofa, another new purchase Joshua had never seen. "Leah, get your suitcase." "Already packed," Lee replied, shooting Joshua a dismissive look. "I've been ready to leave this dump for weeks." Joshua watched in stunned silence as Ian's driver appeared, carrying several expensive-looking suitcases. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. They'd planned this, choreographed his humiliation down to the last detail. "The savings," he said suddenly, his mind racing to catch up. "Our joint account." Natalie's smile turned predatory. "Already transferred to my private account. Consider it compensation for wasting my best years on you." She patted her handbag. "Don't worry. I left enough for you to keep your precious shop running. Though God knows why you'd want to, it's as much a failure as you are. You can't just take our savings," Joshua protested, his voice rising. "That money was for Leah's college fund, for our retirement." "Please," Natalie scoffed. "As if community college needs a fund. Besides, Ian's already arranged for Leah to attend a proper university, one befitting her new social status. My new father can actually provide for me," Leah added, the cruel words delivered with teenage precision. "Unlike you." Joshua felt the floor shifting under his feet. This couldn't be happening, not after 17 years, not after everything they'd built together. "Natalie, please." He tried one last time. "We can work through this. Go to counseling." "Work through what?" Natalie spun to face him, eyes blazing. "Your complete lack of ambition. Your contentment with mediocrity. Face it, Joshua. You're a loser. Always have been. Always will be. The only mistake I made was not seeing it sooner. The papers will come through your office." Ian spoke for the first time, his tone dismissive. "I trust you won't make this difficult. Natalie and Leah deserve their happiness." "Their happiness," Joshua repeated, the words hollow. "You mean your money." "Same thing, isn't it?" Ian smirked, placing a proprietary hand on Natalie's waist. "After all, that's what your wife just told you." "Ex-wife," Natalie corrected, leaning into Ian's touch. "Come on, darling. The jet's waiting, and I'm dying to see the house in Aspen." They moved toward the door, Leah already texting on a new phone. No doubt another gift from Ian. Joshua stood rooted to the spot, watching his family walk away like he meant nothing. At the threshold, Leah paused. For a moment, Joshua saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or memory. But then Natalie called out, "Leah, honey, don't forget your new credit card," and the moment shattered. "Yeah, Dad," Leah's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Have fun fixing other people's computers while we're living the good life. Maybe if you work really hard, you can afford to buy a car made this decade." Then they were gone, leaving Joshua alone in the living room that suddenly felt too big, too empty. Through the window, he watched Ian help them into the Mercedes, saw Natalie lean up to kiss him before sliding into the passenger seat. The car's engine purred to life, a sound of wealth and power that faded into the night, taking with it his wife, his daughter, and any illusions he had about love being enough. The house creaked around him, the silence now absolute. On the mantel, family photos mocked him, smiling faces that had been masks, moments he'd thought were genuine but now seemed staged. When had Natalie's smile become false? When had Leah's love become conditional on his bank balance? He moved through the house like a ghost, noting the empty spaces where Natalie's things had been. The walk-in closet half bare, the vanity stripped of expensive creams and perfumes, Leah's room with walls now blank, the posters of Paris and Milan, gone with her dreams of luxury. In his home office, Joshua's computer hummed to life. The joint account balance stared back at him. $212.47. She'd taken everything. Nearly $80,000 they'd saved over years of careful budgeting. Money meant for Leah's education, for their retirement, for the business expansion he'd been planning. The betrayal was complete. His wife, his daughter, his savings, all gone in a single evening, sacrificed on the altar of greed and status. Shame and humiliation burned in his chest. He thought of his employees at the shop, the vendors he owed money to. How would he make payroll, pay his bills? Everything he'd worked for was balanced on a knife's edge, and Natalie had just pushed it over. One day, he whispered into the darkness, his hands clenching into fists. One day, they'll regret this. It wasn't just a promise. It was a vow, written in the ashes of his destroyed marriage, sealed with the bitter taste of betrayal. Natalie and Leah thought him weak, a failure. They'd thrown away his love for the promise of luxury. Fine. Let them enjoy their champagne and mansions. Let them think they'd won, because Joshua Cain was done being the nice guy, the patient husband, the forgiving father. They'd wanted him to be a loser. He'd show them just how wrong they were. The first light of dawn found Joshua still at his computer, methodically documenting everything. Bank statements showed the precise timing of Natalie's betrayal. She'd been moving small amounts for months, testing the waters before the final transfer. Each transaction told a story of premeditation, of calculated destruction. His phone buzzed periodically with messages from concerned friends. News traveled fast in their social circle. He ignored them all, focusing instead on emails to his attorney and accountant. Natalie might have planned her exit meticulously, but Joshua had spent years building relationships in the business community. People owed him favors. At 6 a.m., his shop's opening time, he called Brian. "Mr. Cain." Brian answered, concern evident in his voice. "I was just heading in." "Take charge today," Joshua interrupted, his voice steady despite his sleepless night. "You'll find revised opening procedures in your email. Call me only for emergencies." "Yes, sir. But are you okay?" "My wife saw Mrs. Cain at Silver Meadows Country Club yesterday with—" "I'm fine." The lie came easily. "Just business to handle. You know how to reach me." Joshua ended the call and stood, his joints protesting after hours at the desk. In the bathroom mirror, he hardly recognized himself. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually neat hair was disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. "You're a loser," Natalie's voice echoed in his memory. "Always have been, always will be." Joshua straightened his spine, studying his reflection with new eyes. His clothes, while clean and professional, spoke of modest success, the kind Natalie had grown to despise. Everything about him had been carefully calculated to appear trustworthy, reliable, safe. Look where that had gotten him. The safety deposit box key felt heavy in his pocket as he drove downtown. Traffic was like this early, the financial district's towers catching the morning sun like beacons of possibility, or warning signs, depending on your perspective. "Good morning, Mr. Cain," the bank manager greeted him, professional concern carefully hidden behind her smile. Had Natalie already been here, flaunting her new life? "How can we assist you today?" "My grandfather's watch," Joshua said simply. "I need to access my safety deposit box." The Patek Philippe had been in his family for 3 generations. His grandfather, a watchmaker turned businessman, had purchased it to mark his first major success. "Never sell it, Joshua," he'd said on his deathbed. "It's not just a timepiece. It's a reminder that patience and precision lead to prosperity." Joshua had intended to give it to Leah on her college graduation. Now, watching the bank manager unlock his box, he felt a grim satisfaction. His grandfather would understand using this legacy as a weapon rather than an heirloom. The watch dealer's office occupied the penthouse floor of a downtown high-rise. Marcus Song had been trying to acquire the Patek Philippe for years, always respecting Joshua's refusal to sell. Joshua, Marcus stood as he entered, genuine surprise on his face. "I didn't expect. Please, sit. What brings you here?" "The watch." Joshua placed the leather case on Marcus's desk. "You made an offer last year. Is it still good?" Marcus studied him carefully. "My offer has actually increased. The market for vintage Patek Philippe's, especially with documented family provenance, I could offer $200,000. But Joshua, are you sure? This watch was meant for my daughter's graduation." Joshua's voice carried no emotion. "Plans change." Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. "Ah, I heard rumors. Silver Meadows is a small community." "The watch, Marcus. Just the watch." 2 hours later, Joshua sat in his car, staring at the cashier's check. $200,000, more than double what Natalie had stolen. Seed money for his transformation. His phone buzzed again. "Natalie, the movers are coming for the rest of my things tomorrow. Don't be there." The text sparked something in Joshua's mind. He started the car, heading not toward home or his shop, but to Riverton Parkway. The for lease sign on the abandoned tech startup's office still stood, weather-beaten and forgotten. Joshua had considered the space months ago, before dismissing it as too ambitious for his modest expansion plans. Now, looking at the vast open floor plan through dusty windows, he saw something different. Not just an office, a command center, a place to rebuild, plan, and execute. His phone rang, the caller ID showing Richard Wu, Venture Capital. "Joshua," Richard's voice was cautiously neutral. "Heard you might be making some changes. Feel like having lunch." 6 months ago, Richard had approached Joshua about his data security patents, offering funding for expansion. Joshua had declined, preferring to grow organically, safely. Now, standing in the empty office space that could hold 50 workstations, safety was the last thing on his mind. "Lunch would be good," Joshua replied. "But first, I need you to meet me somewhere. Bring your checkbook." The Riverton Parkway property. Richard sounded intrigued. "That's ambitious." "You don't know the half of it." Joshua watched his reflection in the dusty windows, seeing not the reliable small business owner he'd been, but the man he needed to become. 1 hour. I'll bring the paperwork." Joshua ended the call and dialed the real estate agent's number. The building's owner had been trying to lease this space for months. Time to make an offer they couldn't refuse. His next call was to a security firm recommended by Marcus. If he was going to wage war on Ian Fields' level, he needed to understand how the wealthy protected their interests. "We provide comprehensive services," the firm's director explained. "Personal security, background investigations, asset protection, everything." Joshua interrupted. "I want everything, and I want to start today." He had $200,000, a brain full of marketable patents, and nothing left to lose. Natalie thought she'd stripped him of everything valuable, but she'd actually done him a favor. Without attachments, without responsibilities to a family that valued only wealth. He could take the risk she'd always accused him of avoiding. Running his business safely had been about protecting their future. Now that future was gone, replaced by a single driving purpose: revenge. A light rain began to fall as Joshua waited for Richard. Each drop on the windows blurred his reflection a little more, washing away the man he'd been. By the time Richard's BMW pulled into the parking lot, Joshua Kane, reliable small business owner, devoted husband, loving father, had vanished. In his place stood someone else. Someone harder, someone who understood that nice guys didn't win. They just provided comfortable stepping stones for people like Natalie and Ian. Well, this stepping stone was about to become a mountain, and when he was done, When he built something so magnificent, it made Unveils' wealth look like pocket change. Natalie and Leah would understand exactly what they'd thrown away. But first, he had an empire to build. Richard emerged from his car, brandishing a leather portfolio, ready to talk business. Joshua smiled, a cold expression that would have startled anyone who knew him before. More than ready. Let's make some waves. They entered the building together, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. Each step took Joshua further from his past and closer to his future. Natalie and Leah had chosen their path. Now he would show them his. The rain intensified outside, a curtain of water separating Joshua's old life from his new one. In his pocket, his phone buzzed again, probably more messages from Natalie about the divorce, about her new life, about all the things she thought he couldn't provide. Let her text. Let her think she'd won. Every message was just more fuel for the fire building inside him, because Joshua Kane wasn't done. Not by a long shot. He was just getting started. The sun had set by the time Joshua finished with Richard and the real estate agent. The Riverton Parkway property was his, along with a substantial investment commitment for his new venture. His data security patents, combined with Richard's connections, would form the foundation of something much bigger than a computer repair shop. That night, in the growing darkness, Joshua drove to his soon-to-be former home. He needed to pack, to clear out before Natalie's movers arrived tomorrow. But first, he had one more call to make. His attorney answered on the first ring. "Joshua, I've been trying to reach you." "I'm ready now," Joshua replied, his voice steady. "Draw up the papers. Give Natalie exactly what she wants. The divorce, the house, everything. Make it quick and clean. Are you sure? We could fight this, especially the unauthorized bank transfers." "No fights." Joshua's tone left no room for argument. "Let her think she's won. I have bigger plans." He ended the call and sat in his car, watching the house where he'd spent the last 5 years building what he thought was a happy life. The lights were off, the windows dark, just like his marriage had been, a facade hiding the darkness within. Tomorrow, he'd start fresh. New office, new business plan, new life. Natalie and Leah wanted to see him as a loser. He'd show them what a real winner looked like. And when he was done, they'd understand the true cost of betrayal. 5 years later, the floor-to-ceiling windows of Kane Technologies' penthouse office offered a commanding view of the city skyline. Joshua Kane stood at the glass, watching the morning sun glint off neighboring buildings. His reflection showed a different man than the one who'd lost everything 5 years ago. A tailored suit, confident posture, cold eyes that had forgotten how to show weakness. "Mr. Kane." His executive assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Wu is here for your meeting." "Send him in, Donna." Richard Wu had aged well in the past 5 years, his hair barely touched with gray. He strode into the office with the confidence of someone who'd made the right bet at the right time. "Joshua." Richard grinned, extending his hand. "Or should I say Mr. Kane, now that you're the talk of every boardroom in the city." Joshua's handshake was firm but brief. "Surprised to see me succeed, Richard." "Surprised. I invested in you, remember? Though I'll admit, even I didn't expect this level of success." Richard settled in one of the leather chairs facing Joshua's desk. "Your data security patents were valuable, but what you've built, it's unprecedented." Speaking of building, Joshua sat behind his desk. "How's Unveils' latest venture performing?" Richard's expression shifted. Still keeping tabs on him. Professional curiosity. Joshua's tone remained neutral, but his eyes hardened. "I heard rumors about instability in his tech investments." "Rumors?" Richard laughed. "The man's bleeding money. 3 failed startups in 2 years. His real estate ventures are underwater, and that new social media platform he backed. Complete disaster." Joshua allowed himself a small smile. "Market forces can be unpredictable." "Market forces?" Richard shook his head. "You've orchestrated every bit of it. The question is, why? You're worth more than him now. Your company's tech is revolutionizing the industry. Why waste time destroying iron fields? Joshua stood, walking back to the window. You ever play chess, Richard? Sometimes. Why? The queen is the most powerful piece, but to win, you don't target the queen directly. You isolate it, remove its defenders, cut off its escape routes. Then when the moment's right, Joshua turned, his expression cold. Checkmate is inevitable, and Ian Fields is your opponent's queen. No, Joshua's voice carried a hint of satisfaction. He's just a pawn who thought he was a king. The intercom buzzed again. Mr. Kane, the board members are gathering for the quarterly meeting. Thank you, Donna. Joshua straightened his tie. Care to join us, Richard? You might find today's announcements interesting. Wouldn't miss it. They took the private elevator to the conference level. Through glass walls, Joshua could see his board members assembling. Industry veterans who'd scoffed at him 5 years ago, now eager to associate with his success. One question, Richard said as they approached the boardroom. If Fields is the pawn, who's the real target? Joshua didn't answer, but his mind flashed to that morning's society page. Natalie Fields, photographed at another charity gala, draped in designer clothes and diamonds. The article praised her philanthropic work, her position on museum boards, her seemingly perfect life. Let her enjoy it. For now. The boardroom fell silent as Joshua entered. 12 faces turned toward him, a mix of respect and wariness in their expressions. They'd learned that Joshua Kane's quiet demeanor masked a ruthless, strategic mind. Ladies and gentlemen, Joshua began, taking his place at the head of the table. Before we discuss quarterly results, I have an announcement. Kane Technologies is acquiring Digital Fortress. Murmurs rippled through the room. Digital Fortress was Ian Fields' largest remaining asset, his primary source of income. But sir, one board member spoke up, Digital Fortress stock has been declining. Their technology is outdated. Precisely. Joshua's smile didn't reach his eyes. We'll be acquiring them at a significant discount. Their client list, however, remains valuable. Fields will never sell. Another board member objected. He's too proud. Pride is expensive, Joshua interrupted. And Mr. Fields' financial situation is precarious. Our offer will be generous, considering the circumstances. My sources tell me his creditors are getting impatient. Richard watched from the corner, understanding dawning in his eyes. This wasn't just business. It was systematic destruction. The paperwork is ready, Joshua continued. Our legal team has prepared for every contingency. By this time next month, Digital Fortress's assets will belong to us, and its employees will be evaluated individually. His tone made it clear some evaluations were already complete. Those who demonstrate loyalty to the company, rather than personal allegiances, will find opportunities here. The meeting continued, but Joshua's thoughts were already moving to the next phase of his plan. Acquiring Digital Fortress would cut off Ian's last major source of income. The man's lifestyle, the mansion, the cars, the private jets Natalie adored, required constant cash flow. When that flow stopped, the intercom buzzed softly. Mr. Kane, there's a call from Silver Meadows Academy. Something about an overdue tuition payment for Leah Fields. Joshua's expression remained neutral, but satisfaction coursed through him. Right on schedule. Take a message, he instructed. Let Natalie handle that particular embarrassment. He resumed the meeting. One more item. Joshua addressed the board. Our charitable foundation will be announcing a major initiative next week. We'll be funding scholarships for underprivileged students, full rides to top universities. The board members nodded approvingly. Such philanthropy was expected from successful companies. Only Richard noticed the cold calculation in Joshua's eyes. This wasn't charity. It was another move in his game. When Leah Fields lost her spot at her prestigious private school due to unpaid tuition, the contrast would be stark. Joshua Kane helping poor students achieve their dreams, while Ian Fields couldn't even maintain his stepdaughter's education. The meeting ended, the board members filing out with their usual mix of deference and haste. Richard lingered. Impressive performance, he commented once they were alone. But Joshua, is all this really necessary? You've won. You're more successful than Fields ever was. Joshua's response was interrupted by his phone buzzing. A text from an unknown number. Please, we need to talk. 5 years of silence, and now she wanted to talk. Joshua deleted the message without responding. Necessary? He finally answered Richard. No, this stopped being about necessity a long time ago. Then what is it about? Richard pressed. Joshua turned to the window, watching his reflection overlay the city below. Chess pieces don't ask why they're moved, Richard. They just play their part until the game is won. And when will you consider it won? The cold smile returned to Joshua's face. When they understand exactly what they threw away. When they realize everything they valued. Wealth, status, luxury, was as fragile as their loyalty. His phone buzzed again, another text. Joshua, please. Things are getting difficult. We should discuss this like adults. N. Delete. Joshua turned back to Richard. Let's discuss how we're going to acquire Digital Fortress for less than half its market value. Because that's what Natalie and Leah need to learn. Everything they thought they owned, everything they built their perfect life upon, was just a loan from fate. And fate, like Joshua Kane, can be merciless when collecting its debts. The Silver Meadows Country Club dining room hummed with lunchtime conversations, silver clinking against fine china as the city's elite maintained their carefully crafted social connections. Joshua sat at his usual corner table, reviewing acquisition documents while waiting for his next meeting. Mr. Kane, the maitre d' approached with obvious deference. Mr. Fields is here to see you. Send him over. Joshua didn't look up from his papers. Ian Fields' expensive Italian shoes clicked against the marble floor, each step less confident than they would have been 6 months ago. The man himself looked tired, his silver hair less perfectly styled, his designer suit showing signs of wear. Kane, Ian remained standing, trying to maintain some illusion of superiority. We need to discuss your offer for Digital Fortress. Sit down, Ian. Joshua's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. You're making the other members uncomfortable. Ian's jaw clenched, but he sat. A waiter appeared instantly with water and menus, the staff having learned to anticipate Joshua's needs. Your offer is insultingly low, Ian began, his voice tight. Digital Fortress is worth 3 times. Was worth, Joshua corrected, finally looking up. Before the data breaches, before the client exodus, before the SEC began their informal inquiry into your trading practices. You engineered all of that. Prove it. Joshua's smile was razor sharp. Your company's failings are well documented. My offer is more than generous, considering the circumstances. Generous. Ian leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. You're trying to steal my company for pennies on the dollar. I built Digital Fortress from nothing. Like you built your marriage. Joshua's words cut through Ian's protests. Taking what belonged to someone else, assuming you'd never face consequences. Color drained from Ian's face. This isn't about Natalie. No, Joshua signaled the waiter. Interesting that your mind went there. How is married life, by the way? I hear Silver Meadows Academy is rather strict about their tuition payment schedule. You scoundrel, Ian whispered. You're behind the bank's sudden audit of my accounts. The banking industry is heavily regulated, Ian. Institutions must conduct due diligence, especially with clients showing irregular patterns. The waiter arrived with a bottle of wine, $1,000 vintage Joshua had pre-ordered. He poured a glass for Joshua, then looked questioningly at Ian. None for me, Ian muttered. This won't take long. Shame. Joshua sipped his wine. It's excellent, though perhaps beyond your current budget. Is this what you wanted? To gloat? Gloating implies emotional investment. Joshua's voice remained coldly professional. This is business, Ian. Your company is failing. I'm offering a lifeline. Take it, or watch Digital Fortress collapse entirely. You're enjoying this. Should I not? You took such pleasure in taking what was mine, called yourself a real man while destroying my family. Joshua's eyes hardened. Now you learn what a real man does when crossed. The club's door opened, admitting Natalie Fields in a designer dress that had seen better days. Her stride faltered when she saw Joshua and Ian together. Perfect timing, Joshua commented as Natalie approached their table. We were just discussing Digital Fortress's future. Joshua, Natalie's voice wavered slightly. I've been trying to reach you. Have you? I've been rather busy. Building an empire takes time, as I'm sure Ian has explained. Though perhaps not recently. Natalie's hand clutched her purse. Last season's model, Joshua noted. This vendetta needs to stop. You've made your point. Vendetta? Joshua raised an eyebrow. I'm simply conducting business. Isn't that what you wanted? A man with ambition. Our joint accounts are frozen, she hissed. The credit cards aren't working. Leah's school is threatening to expel her. How unfortunate. Joshua's tone suggested it was anything but. Perhaps you should discuss financial management with your husband. I hear he's quite skilled at spending other people's money. This is beneath you, Ian tried. But Joshua cut him off with a laugh. Beneath me? Like I was beneath you both. Tell me, how does it feel watching your perfect life crumble? Will you fight the Digital Fortress takeover? Ian's rage deflated into desperation. We'll fight. The board meeting. They voted me out. My own company. Digital Fortress is my company now, Ian, Joshua corrected calmly. The shareholders made their decision by an overwhelming majority, as I recall. Because you bought their loyalty, Ian accused. Threatened their investments. Blackmailed. Careful. Joshua's voice turned to ice. Unfounded accusations of criminal behavior could complicate your legal situation. I understand the SEC is quite interested in your trading history. Natalie sank into a chair, her composure cracking. Joshua, please. What do you want? Want? Joshua stood, signaling the waiter for the check. I have everything I want. A successful company, respect in the business community, the power to choose who rises and who falls. He smiled coldly. Isn't that what you left me for? You're destroying us. Natalie whispered. No, Natalie. You destroyed yourselves the moment you chose greed over loyalty. Joshua gathered his papers. The Digital Fortress offer expires in 48 hours, Ian. After that, I'll let the vultures have what's left. You can't do this, Ian protested weakly. I already have. Joshua signaled for the check. Oh, and Natalie, do give Leah my regards. I hear the public school system has improved considerably since your day. He left them sitting there, broken and bewildered, their half-empty water glasses a stark contrast to his fine wine. Through the club's windows, he could see his driver waiting with a Bentley, a car chosen specifically because it was the model Natalie had always wanted. His phone buzzed with a message from Dana. Mr. Kane, the Silver Meadows Academy Board is ready to accept your foundation's endowment offer. Perfect timing. By tomorrow, the press would announce Kane Technologies' generous donation to the prestigious school, just as Leah Fields lost her place there due to unpaid fees. In the car, Joshua reviewed his next moves. Digital Fortress's acquisition would devastate Ian financially. But that was just the beginning. The real estate market was softening, and Ian's over-leveraged properties would soon be underwater. The mansion Natalie had been so proud of would be the first to go. The office, sir, his driver asked. No. Joshua looked at his watch. Take me to Riverton Parkway. The old office building where he'd started his transformation had been completely renovated, now serving as Kane Technologies' research division. But Joshua kept his original office there unchanged. a reminder of where he'd begun and why. The space was dim when he entered, lit only by the afternoon sun through dusty windows. Here, 5 years ago, he'd made his vow of revenge. Here, he'd begun building the empire that would destroy those who'd betrayed him. His phone buzzed again. A text from Leah. "Dad, please. Mom's crying every night. We're sorry." Joshua deleted the message without responding. Their tears meant nothing to him now. They'd chosen their path, chosen wealth and status over family and loyalty. Now they would learn that true power wasn't in having money. It was in knowing how to take it away. The sun set over Riverton Parkway, casting long shadows through the office windows. Somewhere across town, Natalie and Ian were probably arguing about their dwindling options, their perfect world collapsing piece by piece. Let them argue. Let them feel the weight of their choices, because Joshua Kane was just getting started. The real pain was yet to come. Headlines scrolled across Joshua's tablet screen. Tech giant Digital Fortress, acquired in hostile takeover. Field's empire crumbles. Multiple properties in foreclosure. Kane Technologies announces billion-dollar education initiative. Dana entered his office, tablet in hand. "Sir, the transition team reports Digital Fortress's key personnel have all accepted our offers. Mr. Fields' remaining executives resigned this morning. And the real estate situation. The banks are calling in their loans. The Silver Meadows mansion goes to auction next week." Dana paused. "Mrs. Fields tried to reach you again. She's becoming insistent." Joshua set down his tablet. "Define insistent." "She's in the lobby, sir. Has been for 3 hours. Security wasn't sure how to handle it, given your history." A cold smile crossed Joshua's face. "Send her up." Minutes later, Natalie Fields stepped into his office. The designer clothes that had once fit her perfectly now hung loose. Her jewelry was conspicuously absent, dark circles shadowing her eyes. Poorly concealed by expensive makeup she could no longer afford. "Quite a change from our last meeting," Joshua observed. "No more threats about restraining orders." "You've made your point," Natalie's voice cracked. "Whatever this revenge is." "Revenge." Joshua's tone remained conversational. "I'm simply conducting business. Isn't that what you wanted? Someone who understood ambition." "Stop it." Natalie stepped forward. "You've destroyed everything. The house is being auctioned. Ian's companies are bankrupted. Leah had to leave her school. How does this help you?" "It doesn't." Joshua moved to the window. "But it helps you understand what real power is and what it isn't." "We were wrong," she sobbed. "We made a terrible mistake." "A mistake?" Joshua echoed. "Yes, you did." "Please," Natalie's voice trembled. "We have nothing left." "Wrong." Joshua turned, eyes cold. "You have exactly what you deserve. Now you can live with it, just as I had to live with the consequences of your choices." "Joshua, please," Natalie whispered. "What do you want from us?" "Want?" He walked closer, towering over her in his tailored suit. "I have everything I want. Power, success, respect. Isn't that what you left me for?" Tears streamed down her face. "We were shallow and greedy, but you were always a good man." "Not anymore." He pressed the intercom. "Donna, call security. Our unwanted guest was just leaving." "You can't do this." Natalie's composure finally shattered. "We have nothing." Joshua turned away from her, dismissing her as she'd once dismissed him. "Then it seems we're even." He listened to her protests fade as security escorted her out, her pleas for mercy echoing through the corridor. He felt no sympathy, no pity. She taught him that kindness was weakness. He'd learned the lesson well. The next day, the Silver Meadows mansion went to auction, selling for pennies on the dollar. By week's end, Ian Fields declared bankruptcy. Leah's once glamorous social media posts vanished, replaced by a single note of defeat. And Natalie. Joshua heard rumors she was staying with a distant cousin, applying for retail jobs, unable to comprehend how quickly her world had crumbled. Let her learn humility. Let her see what it meant to lose everything. Late that evening, Joshua stood on his mansion's balcony. The city lights spread before him like a carpet of stars. He remembered the vow he'd made 5 years ago, in that empty Riverton Parkway office. It was fulfilled now, every detail carefully executed. The people who betrayed him had lost the very things they'd once valued above all else. And still, he felt only a cold satisfaction, like signing off on a successful business transaction. That was all they were now. The finished deal, a completed acquisition, a cautionary tale. The old Joshua Kane was gone, and in his place stood the man shaped by betrayal, ruthless, unstoppable, and utterly alone. He raised a glass of fine scotch to the night sky. To consequences, he murmured, because that was what it all came down to. Choices and their consequences. Natalie, Leah, and Ian had made theirs. Now they lived with the result. And Joshua Kane, he had only one final piece of business to attend to, living a life so grand, so brilliant, that they would forever understand what they'd thrown away. Checkmate indeed. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.